10 amazing warrior classes throughout history. Roman legionary. The Romans are legendary for many things. One of the greatest things was the legionary. Their discipline and ability to fight effectively in tight formations won them many battles. They could march, fight, build, and scout enemy territories with little casualties. Legionnaires would serve for 25 years, before spending their last 5 years as veterans and dealing with lighter jobs. They were generally equipped with their curved shield, a helmet, 2 javelins, a short sword, a dagger, a pair of heavy sandals, 14 days' worth of food, cooking equipment, and a shovel or wicker basket. Discipline was the main reason for the legionaries' impressive success rate and can be attributed to the long-lasting existence of the Roman Empire. Samurai. As the elite warriors of feudal Japan, the samurai are legendary in their own right. While samurai are typically imagined as using only a sword, they also used bows and spears when on the battlefield. After trading with the Portuguese, they added matchlock pistols into their arsenal as well. Originally, they wore a form of lamellar armor, which eventually evolved into the samurai armor called yoroi, which was rather heavy to wear because all of the weight was carried from the shoulders. With the invention of firearms, a new kind of armor was made, lighter and tapered to the waist, allowing quicker action in combat, called Tosai Gusaku. There came a time when social status wasn't required to become a samurai, as they were eventually integrated into the normal militia. There was always a high demand for strong and proficient warriors, and the samurai fit that bill. Vikings. Believe it or not, most Vikings were fishermen and farmers who spent most of the year in their home country, and then during the summer they would venture out across the sea to raid, trade, and seek out new lands to settle in. In fact, the term Viking doesn't refer to a race per se. All the Vikings were Norse, but not all Norse were Vikings. Viking actually means expedition overseas, which is what they were doing, typically bringing along shields, axes, swords, and spears, as well as some mail armor. Maori Warriors. Hailing from the thick jungles of New Zealand, Maori warriors were both brave and savage. Fighting in groups of a few hundred at a time, these warriors would attack at dawn, sneaking up on their enemy and ambushing them. They could disappear and reappear swiftly and quietly. They utilized 2 short clubs, a longer club, and a weapon called a taiaha that had notches along one side, perfect for catching the opponent's weapons and then disarming them with a simple flick of the wrist. The group consisted mostly of men, but women were known to fight as well, and they would often only lose less than 100 warriors at a time. Immortals. The Immortals were an army of 10,000 heavy infantry, who were both the Imperial Guard and the standing army during the expansion of the Persian Empire and the Greco-Persian Wars. They were the elite force of the First Persian Empire. Being chosen to become an immortal was a great honor. Herodotus gave the name Immortals to them, and we owe most of the historical knowledge we have about the elite warriors to his writing. The name Immortal was given to them because when a member of the 10,000-strong force was killed or wounded, someone else immediately replaced him. Thus, from the outside's perspective, it would appear that each member of the infantry was immortal, and their replacement may have represented a resurrection of sorts. They were sophisticated and well-equipped, their armor glittering like gold, with wicker shields, short spears, swords or large daggers, and bows and arrows. Spartans. Sparta was one of the most dominant military city-states of ancient Greece. While other city-states like Athens centered on the arts, learning, and philosophy, Sparta was completely focused on extreme military training. The Spartans used a bronze helmet and chestplate accompanied by a bronze and wooden shield, utilizing short swords and spears as weapons. They also used a formation called a phalanx, where they banded together to create a protective wall with their shields, which is considered to be among the best variations of the procedure because of their intense training system. Starting their military training at the age of 7, Spartan boys were bred for the art of combat. The Spartans' most famous battle is actually one of their biggest defeats. In the Battle of Thermopylae in 480 BC, 300 Spartans kept the entire Persian army from entering Greece for 2 days. Eventually, all 300 Spartans were killed. However, their sacrifice led to a Greek victory over the Persians. Genoese crossbowmen. A military corps from the Republic of Genoa, the Balestrieri Genovesi were crossbow-wielding mercenaries for both Italian and foreign powers. They were generally hired not only for their skills, but because they were widely available in large groups. Genoese law required a specific number of crossbowmen on their galleys, which is where the high number of professional crossbowmen came from. Operating a crossbow was easier than a longbow because it didn't require as much strength. However, it did take considerably longer to reload. Apart from the crossbow, they were also equipped with a dagger, a light metal helmet, and a large shield, which was used while reloading the crossbow. English longbowmen. The longbow has played a pretty important role in the history of England, considering how many of its famous battles featured the use of the longbow. Archery played a very prominent role in the Battle of Hastings, with the then King of England, Harold Godwinson, being shot in the eye by a Norman bowman. The longbow differs from a standard bow because it is longer in length and it requires the archer to pull the arrow towards his chest rather than the ear in order to fire. The longbow wasn't refined until the late 13th and early 14th centuries, when they were used in battles like the Battle of Crecy in 1346, the Battle of Agincourt in 1415, the 100 Years' War, and many more. While the longbows were much faster and more accurate than the black powder weapons that followed, longbowmen always took a long time to train. Serious military interest in the longbow faded after the 17th century, but still cropped up every so often. The last recorded use of a longbow in a war was by Jack Churchill in World War II, when he used it to signal his troops in an ambush on a group of Germans by shooting their leader. Mongolian horse archers. Originally derived from nomadic hunting tribes who would hunt herds of cattle, sheep, and goats by following them around from one grazing ground to another, Mongolian archers were the figurative backbone of the Mongol army, and they were some of the finest archers ever to wield a bow and arrow. These archers lived most of their lives on horseback until their horses became a virtual extension of themselves. The Mongols took archery very seriously, training young boys to hunt wildlife from an early age, as their legendary leader Genghis Khan believed that hunting was a great preparation for war. Once made a part of the army, the Mongols would learn to work in sync with one another, to the point where 1,000 archers would fire their bows in unison and rain down death upon their enemy. Medieval knights. There were three different kinds of soldiers during the Middle Ages: foot soldiers, archers, and knights. Knights were heavily armored and rode on horseback. Only the wealthiest of nobles could afford to be knights, seeing how the armor, weapons, and battle-ready warhorse could be quite expensive. The first knights appeared around the reign of Charlemagne in the 8th century, fighting battles across his large empire, hence riding horseback. Charlemagne would reward his best knights with land in return for agreeing to fight for him whenever he asked. This practice began to catch on with the rest of Europe and became the standard practice for the next 700 years. Generally speaking, if you were a son born into the family of a knight, you'd become a knight yourself. The typical weapons used by a knight were a lance, a polearm, a blunt weapon like a club or morning star, and a sword. By the end of the Middle Ages, knights were no longer needed as part of an army. Countries had formed their own armies with their own soldiers who were paid to train and fight, not to mention the advancement of the art of war. With the invention of longbows and firearms, as well as new battle tactics, it made the knights' heavy armor cumbersome and useless.